All right, everybody. I got the high sign to get started here, so I'm going to dig in. We got a lot to cover. I got about 55 slides in about 55 minutes, so a lot to churn through. Save your questions for the end if you can. If you need to sort of interrupt me as we go, that's totally fine as well. Just raise a hand. The topic today is design at scale. My name is Dan Harrelson. I'm a UX architect at GE. GE, being a big company, has some very interesting problems, I think, in the way that we go about getting great UX across the globe, across all of the products that we deliver. I'm going to be talking a bit about that today. Hopefully you'll find some interesting nuggets in the ways that we're solving problems. Some of them may be pertinent to the work that you're doing if you're in a very large organization as well. Perhaps even you'll see some things in here that while your organization is much smaller, pretty much every organization is, you may be able to find some things in here about how you work with your customers or how you work with other development communities, things of that sort, right? I'll be talking a bit about like how we're doing open source and that kind of thing, which I think can be pertinent to pretty much anybody. What are we talking about when I talk about scale, right? There's lots of different ways to think about scale. Certainly, we can think of a scale as something that measures your weight, right? Certainly, we're not talking about that. In this context, for a conference like this, we could be talking about scaling your application, right? Netflix, folks like that would be able to talk a lot about that. I'm not going to be talking about that today. So if you were looking for sort of like tips and tricks about how to scale your application, lots of concurrent users, lots and lots of like data and that kind of stuff, this isn't going to be what that's about. This is going to be more about scaling impact. Right? How do we, as a small group within a large organization, make a huge amount of impact through really great UX design and really great front-end development that can really sort of change lives and have an impact at the sort of scale that GE has the opportunity to bring to bear. And why is GE, interested in this? Why am I up here talking about this? Well, it's because GE is really big. Just show of hands real quick. Show me raise your hand if you are working with at least one other person. All right, keep your hand up if you're working in a company of at least 5 people. Keep your hand up if you're working with at least 10 people. Oh, we got a couple hands down. Okay, 50. How many people are working with at least 50 people in the organization? 100? 1,000? Keep your hand up if you're working in a company of 5,000 people or more. 10,000 people or more. 50,000 people or more. Okay, cool. We got some enterprise folks around the room still. 100,000 people or more inside of your organization. Cool. We got some people with a big company. That's awesome, right? One of the interesting things about GE is we have about 300,000 global employees right now. And that's a sort of a rough public number that we toss around. Internally, I've heard the number is closer to 350, plus we have another 150 or so thousand contractors. So we're talking about a global employee base of somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 people, right? That's huge. That's gigantic. Like, that's the size of a large city. And any small division inside of that is the size of a small town, right? How do you bring that to bear? How do you do great work within an organization like that? And how do you leverage an organization that is this big, that literally on a daily basis touches billions of people around the world? How do you do good work through all that, right? How do you have that scale be of a huge benefit? A couple other fun numbers to point out for GE. We were founded by Thomas Edison back in 1892, so we're celebrating our 121st anniversary. Everything that comes with that, being an old company, the good and the bad. We're a brand name. We've been around forever. We've also got a lot of baggage, right? Because we've been around for so long. We have huge capital to bring to bear, right? To affect change. Our scale is bolstered by the fact that we have over $150 billion a year in revenue, and our total profits on that are upwards of $10 billion, right? So what can you do when you're an organization that has this sort of reach and this sort of capabilities to it? GE is global, right? You will go around the world and everyone knows the name GE. We operate in every single language, every single currency. We work heavily in developed nations, but more and more, our business is moving into developing nations as well. We're providing technology that is helping our developing nations, such as India or China, to enter into the modern world. And how do we do that? What are the interesting challenges that brings to bear? Is something that we deal with every day. GE is really, really diverse, right? A challenge that we have is that we have thousands of anything, perhaps millions of most things, right? You name a technology and it's in our stack, right? You name the type of people that might be in an organization, and we have thousands of them, right? We have tons and tons of products. Some of them are old, some of them are brand new. This vastness, right, brings both great opportunity, but also great challenges as well. And we need to find techniques that bring great UX and great front-end development across sort of this large landscape. GE makes all kinds of things, right? Everybody here probably thinks of us as making light bulbs. Oh, that is really washed out. So that's the bottom of the light bulb as far as you're concerned. So we only make the bottom part. No. But do all 300,000 of those employees sit around every day at their desk and craft glass and steel to make light bulbs? No. Actually, very little of our business today is in the home lighting business. It's certainly our brand and is what we're known for, but we're actually more building things like this, right? We're actually creating all the power of the world. We're making gas turbines and steam turbines that generate power for most of the municipalities around the world, right? US, South America, Asia as well. We make large wind turbines, right, as well. The largest windmill farm in the world is in China. Almost all the equipment in that is GE equipment. So we're heavily involved in making this big machinery that powers the world. We make jet engines, right? This is an awesome picture of this fantastic testing facility that we have outside of Cincinnati. That thing on your right side there, that big funnel, it collects all of the output from a jet engine. It has tons of sensors to measure the thrust that is being generated at any particular time. That round ball thing there, so the engine is this little thing here. And remember that a jet engine is big enough for a human to stand inside of, right? And it's the smallest thing on this picture. And that other big circle there, it can simulate all kinds of weather conditions, including generating lightning and hitting the jet engine while it's running, and then it can measure the thrust, right? Really cool stuff. This is the kind of stuff that GE is working on every day. We have tons of engineers working on these big problems, right? GE is one of the largest creators of locomotives, right? We move all of the cargo around North America, around South America, and through China as well. Something that a lot of people don't know, but this is one of the big things we work on. Something that probably touches your lives on a regular basis is healthcare, right? GE is very well known in the space of MRIs, making large, expensive machinery that can look inside the human body. We have systems that actually manage hospitals as well. There's a lot of talk on the web right now around health records. We have a lot of systems that help to manage health records and things of that sort. But more and more of our attention in the healthcare space is going into more low-cost equipment, such as this handheld ultrasound. This has the same quality of an ultrasound machine that you might find in UCSF, a large room and all that kind of stuff. But this is specifically developed as a low-cost version for developing nations, right? Where a village, in India could have equipment like this and have it move around to multiple clinics and be able to, have women have healthier babies and this sort of thing, right? This is a lot of where our time and attention is going to right now, sort of in the healthcare space. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't call out the fact that we make microwaves. I would love to say that on your first day at GE, Donaghy shows up to your desk with a fun cooker, but alas, not so much. Certainly we're in the home appliances space, but that's again a pretty small part of our business. It's more the industrial side of things. All right, so who cares, right? Why do we want to sit at a HTML5 conference and hear about big pieces of steel and all that kind of stuff, right? We want to talk about the web. Well, turns out that almost all of this equipment is powered by software. right? And this is where GE is investing heavily over the next decade, is in the software part of this. We have figured out a lot of the heavy industrial side of this business. Now what we need to do is invest in the software that can make all of this operate better. There's a lot of talk around, if you kind of Google this term, industrial internet, you'll find all kinds of quotes around how a 1% difference in the operating cost of all these big machines that we have can have billions and billions of dollars worth of operational savings or improvement in revenue across all of our customers, right? So there's a lot of opportunity to have software sort of improve all of this big machinery, and that's a lot of the work that myself and my team is working on. That's why GE is here recruiting heavily. That's why we're investing so much in building out a much more robust software capability within the company. One of the problems that we suffer from regarding sort of the UX and the front-end development space is that we're very, very splintered, right? Because GE has been around for a while, because the early days of software development, GE was around, and so we've done everything from building software and punch cards all the way up to today. As a result, we have a large diversity of experiences that our customers have when using the software that powers all of this big machinery, right? We got a screenshot here of sort of a sampling of the apps that you can go to today in the App Store and download that have the name GE in them, right? They all look very different. They tend to be low quality, and sort of it's emblematic of one of the problems that we have to solve, right? And in doing that, we've gone out and we said that we need to focus on providing a unified experience for our customers, right? No matter who you are, whether you're a consumer who wants an app to manage your refrigerator, or whether you are somebody who is managing a power plant, we want you to have a good and high quality user experience when you're using our software. So how do we do that, right? We spent about a year now really investing heavily in this, and I'm going to walk you guys through all of the various components of what went into to our solution, right? I'll show you some code. I'll talk about all the technology we have to bear, and I'm more than happy to go deeper into this. And I don't think any of this is super proprietary, and I'm happy to share sort of what we've done in hopes that maybe it can help you guys, with the challenges you have that are similar. The first thing that we did is we sat down and we said we need to come up with a design system, right? Design system being sort of a set of standards by which we can come up with apps. Does anyone know who this gentleman is? It's Dieter Rams. Dieter Rams was the head of design at Braun back in the 50s and 60s. Back in the 60s, he basically was like the Johnny Ives of today, right? He was the guy working at the company that had the coolest hardware out there, and he came up with this notion of a design system for a hardware company that can really sort of drive a differentiation in the market. If you looked at Braun equipment in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even in the 90s, it was really cutting edge, beautifully designed, and it really had this whole system that went with it. And so Dieter sort of like is our sort of like guide as we think about the design systems that we build at GE. Sort of in a nutshell, when we think about a design system, it's a collection of assets, both visual and interaction elements, that when brought together create a consistent user experience across a variety of channels. And not just a consistent user experience. Actually, that's the kind of thing that a company like GE typically tackles is, oh, we're really inconsistent, so let's make them consistent. But also, we need to make sure that it's high quality, right? And often, you'll see that enterprises will opt for consistency, and yes, the button is in the same place every single time, but it doesn't mean it's the right place to have it or that kind of stuff, right? And so our team has worked to both embody consistency and high quality at the same time in the artifacts that we're delivering to help build great software. The design system components that are pretty standard are things like your branding, your visual design, your interaction design. How is it that you interact with the application and it works? Things like the typography, etc. The screenshot you see on the right here, you're going to see a bunch of screenshots similar to this. This is our design system. If you look at a GE app that is built on what we call the Industrial Internet Design System, it looks like this. I'm going to dig into the code behind it as well. This is sort of our baseline for how apps need to function and look, across this industrial space, right? So these are pretty standard components that probably anybody here, could apply to some sort of a standard design set that they want within their organization. GE being GE, we needed to tackle, again, some of the more domain-specific pieces that we have, one of them being that we have big needs for data visualization. GE is in the business of pulling lots and lots of data, terabytes of data, off of our big machines and making sense of it, right? So we need to be able to think about, UX-wise, technology-wise, how are we going to show all that information, right? And we put a lot of thought into things like reports. What do the reports look like, when someone at Southwest Airlines is using a GE app to determine, the performance of the $1 billion that they invested in jet engines, right? What sort of charting do we have? How do you interact with the data in order to really gather more insights? How do you dig in and really understand? And then how do you do things like sharing, right? A next big piece that kind of falls within our domain is collaboration. We did a lot of design work around the collaboration mechanisms that we need to use. There's a lot of use cases within our domain for technicians who need to be able to do some work and need to collaborate with their peers while doing that, right? We have use cases around, somebody who is at a power plant and has a mobile device, and they are trying to fix that device, yet they don't really understand, which wrench to use or something of that sort, right? And so we need to bake into our design system, mechanisms for doing instant messaging or video, perhaps even document annotation, right, where they can mark up, some sort of a analytics piece or some sort of a document and be able to share it over the wire with somebody as well. I think the last thing to talk about design-wise, right, just straight up sort of visual and interaction design-wise, is the fact that we also, tackled the device problem, right? Being that we're in 2012, 2013, as this was all being conceived, it would have been foolish of us to simply tackle the desktop, And this, again, is the sort of thing that's very endemic inside of large enterprises like a GE. Right? People would perhaps look at, we need to solve this as a desktop-only problem, but we really baked a lot of consideration into how does this need to work across tablets, across devices, obviously thinking, responsive web and all that kind of stuff, very much baked into all of the design that went into this system. So we didn't stop there, though. We said we can't simply end with a set of PowerPoint files. We can't end with some comps and some Photoshop files that we send around and say, hey, here's our design system. Go forth and build apps that are great. We knew that we needed to take it a bit farther. We know the audience inside of GE. They're traditionally engineers, and they need code. They need to be able to move forward with it. So we had to turn all of that then into working code that we could distribute throughout the company. So the platforms and the frameworks are really the areas where this kind of congeals. First, quickly talking about sort of the architecture that we're playing in. Apps for GE are every type that you can imagine, right? Certainly they're ones that run in the cloud. But what does that even mean, right? GE has its own cloud. We have partnerships with Amazon and Microsoft so we can run in their cloud. We even have our customers. Our customers are themselves large, gigantic corporations, and they have their own cloud environments, right? So we need to be able to come up with an architecture that can work across all those different mechanisms and be able to scale in those ways. We have desktop web. We also have native desktop needs as well, right? We have times where we need to be able to talk to native OS APIs. We need to be able to have that for either security or real-time data information or whatever it is. So we have needs for that. We have needs that our architecture work, mobile, and then we have really interesting needs where it also needs to be embedded, right? We have hardware that we're shipping out that in itself could have software on it, and that software itself might have HTML5 apps running inside of it, right? So how do we come up with an architecture that can really span all of these and be consistent? How do we do that? And that's the kind of thing that we spend a lot of time on, and we're still working through it. We're still trying to figure out what are all the different edge cases, and how do we come up with some consistency, right? So that we can deliver sort of both a great UX, but also have it be secure and fast and reliable across this broad spectrum of technology. So I'm going to walk through the front-end technology that we've selected, talk a bit about all the various components of it. After I get through the talk, I'm happy to go into any of these bits more. There's members of my team who are also attending the conference today, so I'd be happy to connect you up with them if you want to go really deep into any of these specific pieces. I think it'd be remiss for me not to call out the company that's out there that really is doing design at scale really well right now, and that's Bootstrap. GE is built on top of Bootstrap. Our design system works on top of them, and I think kudos to them, right? I mean, thinking about, you want to talk about scale, two guys inside of Twitter, who on their spare time did some work, are like changing design across the entire web every day, right? It's amazing, right? And they've been doing so traditionally through, small web apps, now getting to be bigger and bigger, and now behemoths like GE are adopting Bootstrap internally as our standard. I mean, what a tremendous accomplishment that these guys have that sort of an effect on design at scale, and we're really happy to be sort of building on top of their technology, and it's helping us then scale as well. Beyond Bootstrap, a couple of the other things that we're using in our HTML CSS stack, we're using Modernizer and Respond. A company like GE has to support legacy browsers. I would love to say that we can just be IE 10 and above, and that's it. But it's one of the pieces you get when you work for a company the size of GE. So we support IE 8 and above. We support Firefox 3.5 and above. We support Chrome something or other and above, right? So we need things like Modernizer and Respond to really help us out, with all that IE 8 scaffolding using HTML shim and all that kind of thing. And then we're getting a lot of value out of Less as well. Certainly, we originally signed up for Less as we decided to build on top of Bootstrap. It made sense for us to take that in as well. But we've done some really interesting work in being able to push that forward, because what we need to do now is continue to support our design system, in the wild as more and more of our customers, our internal customers are using it, and Less is really helping us with that scale story. On the JavaScript side of things, we're primarily using jQuery. jQuery clearly brings great support for DOM manipulation. The type of apps that we're making are not your super interactive, media trailer, Sony Pictures type ones. So jQuery is more than sufficient for that. One of the things that we have to deal with as well when we select technology is how do all of the engineers inside of my company, work with our design system without having to call me up, without having to spend time and have me explain how to do things. So, kind of doing the Stack Overflow test, right? Can they go to Stack Overflow and search for a piece of technology that we're talking about and get some good answers, right? Things like jQuery makes that super easy. It's just so ubiquitous. There's so many plugins out there. There's so many articles and tutorials for everyone to be able to learn jQuery really, really easy. So it's a really easy choice for us. We're using Require.js to do asynchronous module definition, right? So a lot of the apps that we built are tending to be the single-page apps, right, where we need to be loading in all of our components dynamically. Require is really becoming a great win for us, and that way it's making our pages perform better. It's also giving us a much more, our apps inherently can be really, really complex with a lot of different moving pieces. Require really helps take away some of that complexity. Steep learning curve, this is one of the areas that we're having to invest heavily in with internal training because it is kind of a different way of thinking about JavaScript, but we're seeing a lot of value in that. Just recently, we selected Knockout.js as our MVC framework, or our MVVM, technically, framework. So in our single-page apps, right, this is allowing us to really manage that lifecycle. One of the big reasons that we really like it and we're drawn to Knockout is that it's so great with doing straight-up data binding. right? Where you do declarative markup and quickly just bind that to a model, which is sort of the use cases that we have, right? Where we need to take big data that we're pulling through a pipe, and then bind it to some sort of a widget or whatever in a page, and Knockout really works really well for us in that. A couple other pieces of JavaScript that we use here and there. We use Grunt mostly for building our design system, and then we deliver that to all of our internal customers so that they can use it in building their front-end code for their app. And then we're using Node primarily right now at development time and at prototyping time. We're not yet putting it really deep into our production stack. It may come. There are some groups inside of GE that are kind of playing with that a bit. It's good for things like mapping products or for some real-time stuff. But today we're primarily using Node sort of as a development tool to help you do some rapid prototyping and things of that sort. As I mentioned, visualization, a big piece of what we do. We ship high charts as one of our core libraries. This is our only piece of commercial software that we have inside of our design system. We really found a lot of value in high charts and are willing to pay for it. The rest of it's all open source. And so high charts brings to bear just really great support for generating complex, really high data intensive charts. We also are shipping D3. D3 is more of a low-level visualization tool that we can use to make much more complex pieces of data viz as well. I'm sorry it's a little bit washed out here, but the sample on the right here is actually one of the things that we've included in our version of a design system, where we've put some code together that allows a developer to do declarative D3. So basically at the top there you have a div tag with a whole bunch of data bind properties on it, and then bottom is sort of the JavaScript code that will walk that div and will generate a donut chart or a bar or whatever, that sort of thing, right? One of the benefits is that because D3 can be so complex, it's a bit of a steep learning curve. If we can abstract some of that away, our developer base has a much easier time adopting sort of our technology and building all those great apps that we need to bring to bear. Data tables listed here. Datatables.net. You can find it. It's a jQuery plugin that has all kinds of amazing functionality for pulling in data and being able to render it as a data grid, basically, right? If folks are familiar with the Sentia toolkit, they have a data grid. This is very similar. This is an open source jQuery-based one. And so we've invested heavily in theming it to work sort of in our design system, put all kinds of different wrappers around it as well. Lots of examples around how our developers can leverage it both with static data, data that they pulled via AJAX commands, and all that kind of stuff. jQuery UI is up here. We're not using jQuery UI very much. We're only using it for a couple of little layout things. And to be honest, because we're not using it very much, we're actually looking at perhaps stripping it out. It's pretty heavy for the amount that we're really using it. Using it for sorting tables and things of that sort. So we may actually look at writing our own or finding a different library that's a little bit thinner than jQuery UI, but that's in our stack as well. The final category of front-end components that we're using are kind of the helper categories, right? This is like the kitchen sink. First of all, we need lots and lots of icons. GE loves icons. We make really complex apps, and a lot of times you need to use icons in order to describe sort of what the screen needs to do, for screen real estate issues and that sort of thing. So today we're actually using Font Awesome. It is a vector-based, icon support tool, right? Where essentially you stuff all of your icons into a font, and then you, via CSS, can then reference each of those and then display a resolution-independent icon on your screen. Works great at Retina. You can scale it up and down, all that kind of stuff, right? What we're looking to do is actually sort of supersede Font Awesome with our own icon toolchain. We have somebody who joined the team and spent a lot of really awesome manpowers coming up with a mechanism whereby we can have our designers, our UX designers, work in tools like Illustrator, design a large set of icons, and literally in GE we're talking about like thousands and thousands of icons, right? We have, healthcare alone, I think, has 5,000 icons in it. And so allow them to use, tools they're comfortable with, like Illustrator, and they'd be able to use scripting to generate out font files, SVGs, pings, do them at different colors, and all this kind of stuff, right? So we've got this whole kind of tool chain, right, where on a Mac somebody can build all these icons. We're going to probably then start to deprecate all of the Font Awesome support that we have right now in our design system in favor of this, right? Just so that we have a little bit more control. The Font Awesome technology is really good, and we're actually leveraging some of that when we actually pipe it into our design system, but we need to be able to support our own tool chain, our own creation of icons through all of this, and so we're doing that. One of the things that I'm really hoping that I can get done this year is the open sourcing of this icon toolchain, so that you can go to github.com/General Electric and you'll be able to see a public repo there of all the work that we did. I want to invest heavily in taking a lot of the work that we've done in our design system, the stuff that we kind of glued all these pieces together, and be able to open source a lot of that. And I think the icon toolchain one is something that I think a lot of people, a lot of organizations would find valuable. So I'm excited about that. 3 small ones just to call out. We're looking at Parsley.js. It's a jQuery plugin for doing form validation. So it's a consistent way to both declaratively, mark up your form elements and be able to say, how are they valid. It works across, all sorts of different browsers, including IE8, so that you don't have to. Certainly we know HTML5 has a lot of the built-in validators, right? But you're giving sort of your experience to the browser, right, and counting on the browser to determine, how to display the validity or not of a form field, and then also, browser support. So Parsley sort of is a layer on top of that, and it's we're utilizing that. Another one called Chosen. The guys at Harvest have come up with this really neat form augmenter. It allows you to, using jQuery, to add more functionality into form elements and that sort of thing. And then the last is JUnit. We have a lot of JavaScript in our design system, and we're using Jasmine. We're using Jasmine to be able to test all that going through as well. So lots and lots of bits and pieces of technology there, all stitched together. And so what do we do with that, right? So we've come up with the designs, we built it into code. Basically, we make a zip file, right? We've got an internal website that anybody inside of GE can get to, right? You guys can't get to it, but anybody else can get to it. And they can download a zip file, right? We did that on purpose, right? There's a lot of legacy inside of companies like GE to put forms in place, and you have to request it, and you have to get your manager's approval, right? And we balked all that. We said, no, we're going to put all this together as a zip file, and you can download our HTML, our CSS, our JavaScript, the less source files, all of it, right? Go to town. And what that has done is over the last 8 months had a huge amount of adoption across the company, right? People in Bangalore are emailing me and saying, oh my gosh, I found this IIDS thing and now I'm working on it. I'm trying to put it into my crazy Python app or my .NET app or whatever, right? And so we're able to help them out and able to learn on what they're doing because everybody wants to adopt this, right? Now we're seeing that through very limited evangelism, tons and tons of people are building apps using our UX system, right? The apps are suddenly looking a lot better. They're looking a lot more consistent just by putting out this file that people can download and they can throw it into their apps, right? But that's not enough. We have an audience inside of GE that, quite frankly, is a lot of back-end engineers, right? There's probably a 1 to 100 ratio of back-end to front-end engineers. And so we have a lot of product teams out there who, no fault of their own, are trying to build apps that have a UI, but they don't really know how to do a good UI, right? So we need to help them along the way. And so what we're doing is we're actually baking this design system into a full stack web application framework as well, so that they can buy into both back-end and front-end code paradigms, and we can help them build an app entirely, from scratch, right? And have it all look the way that we need it to look, have it all have the great UX that we need it to have. So to walk through that a little bit more, we have adopted the Play framework. Play is a modern web application framework that is built using Java and Scala. Again, I mentioned that we have a lot of backend engineers. We have a lot of Java backend engineers. Would it be fun for us to embrace Ruby on Rails or frankly Node? Absolutely. It could be really interesting. It'd be really modern. We'd be on the cutting edge. Would alienate a ton of our audience, right? We got a lot of people, inside this company who are building great apps, and we need to be able to have them leverage the knowledge that they already know, right? Java is the most popular programming language in the world. It's probably not going to change. So we purposely selected a web application framework that works in Java, but doesn't work like your traditional Java web app framework, right? Play has been around for about 3 years now, I think, and very much looked at sort of the world of your Django's and your Ruby on Rails and sort of these development environments that, frankly, are a lot more fun. They're more productive. They help you get from idea to a prototype a lot faster. And they completely rethought, how a Java web app framework should be based on looking at that world as opposed to looking at the traditional world. They did things like drop the whole servlet model. It doesn't exist anymore, right? Instead, it's all stateless. It's running on, a different web web server called Netty, et cetera, right? They also did things to really reach out to the front-end development community, right? Where folks like yourselves who maybe don't know Java and frankly don't want to know Java, and I don't blame you, can play inside this world, right? Because it has first-class support for less. It actually will compile your less for you. It has first-class support for Require.js in the latest 2.1 version. Previously, it was using Common.js, and they switched. So they align a lot more with sort of our needs as well, which is great. And lots of other support as well, right? They have mechanisms for being able to pull in components like jQuery and that kind of stuff, right? So it's a web app framework that really caters to modern web development, right? Sort of the modern workflows that you can look at, like the Paul Irishes and the Adi Esmatis, of the world, the guys who are really talking about, here's how we make web apps today, right, guys? We need to have our tools work with this. Play is the closest thing in sort of in that Java world that works with that, and we're really excited about working on top of that. Oh, and just as a corollary to my previous slide where I showed a big zip file, you can see over on the right side here the packaging that you get when you build an app in our framework, right? So all of that is your typical skeleton for a Play app. If you've never used Play, don't worry about it. That's what it looks like. And then you'll see down there towards the bottom, there's a public folder, and under that you'll see something called IIDS. If you remember previously, I said IIDS.zip is the way to basically get all the markup. This basically bakes that into your web application framework. We also ship all of that great front-end code into our web app framework so that somebody, who is a Java developer can basically now download a different zip file, essentially, and they have, all of this back-end processing, connectivity to databases, and they have all of the great code to make their UX work so much easier and so much more consistent. Quick architectural slide here. Everything that we're building is service-oriented, so we have APIs everywhere. Every piece of apps that we're building, have tons and tons of APIs in them. We're using REST and JSON all over the place. Quick, diagram here sort of showing how we're doing our data binding. For the folks who are curious about that sort of thing, right? If you look at an app that we published through this whole framework, we're actually putting just enough sort of markup in serving that up to the client to be able to have a widget like this D3 donut chart here up here, and then we're actually configuring it and we're binding data to it via an asynchronous call, an AJAX call, via JSON, right? All of that is very perfectly done, very much like your single-page web app model, where we're breaking away from the traditional, like, the server, builds and composes all of your UI and ships it over. Instead, we're kind of retooling around, what is really, arguably a more modern approach, where we're doing sort of the basic layout, and then we're sending lots of data pipes as well. We're finding a lot of advantages as well in WebSockets. Play loves WebSockets. It works really, really well with it. Works really well with its non-blocking, interface as well, so that we can get really high performance of sending through all that data. A couple areas that we're experimenting in this year are in the mobile and desktop space. We're working on sort of how does this whole design system notion, right? How does this work, when we have needs for a native mobile app, right? A native tablet app. And right now it's looking like PhoneGap is sort of the way to go. We're doing a lot of experiments around that, around how do we ideally not change our design system at all, right? We know that it already can scale down to a small size, but then how do we stuff that inside of a web view, inside of a native app, and have the native app be perhaps more secure? How do we have it, be able to use all the native APIs, but still render appropriately inside of a PhoneGap or inside of a web view? We're looking a little bit at Chromium. We're going to be looking at Chromium a lot, probably later in the year, because we have more and more people who are saying, great, I'm bought in, I want to do this, but I need a native desktop app, right? I have 30 years of experience that says the only way that I can meet my customers' needs is through writing COM objects and C and all that kind of stuff, right? And so we're doing some experiments to first of all find out maybe they're right. Maybe actually HTML5 is not quite there yet. We think it is, and so we're doing experiments to sort of prove that out, so that we can support a full architecture, everything from a native app on Windows, Mac, Linux, whatever, that is essentially a WebKit browser, right, and uses HTML5 internally and runs at full CPU clock cycles and all that kind of stuff, as well as running on the cloud and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so we talked a bit about how to get great UX across a big company by coming up with a design system, right? Sort of figuring out what is the system that you need, code enabling it, and delivering it off to your customers. In our case, my customers are my developers, right, across the globe, and giving them sort of what they need so that they can actually build great apps, right? Frankly, that's not enough. And one thing that we've learned a lot over the last 5, 6, 7 months since we have released some code and had people working with it, is we really need to focus on what I'm calling the developer experience, right? We need to focus on what happens when somebody buys in and starts to actually build an app using all of the tools that I have given to them. And there's a lot of them. Estimates are that there's about 14,000 engineers inside of GE. It's supported by a team of roughly about 15. Maybe it might be a little bit like 10, right? So there's a lot of people that we need to support. A lot of people have my email address. A lot of people can book time on my calendar, and I need to stop them from doing that, right? I need to support them in a very scalable way, right? So how do I do that? How do I give them all the code, get them set up, but then be able to support them in a way that can scale? Couple of pillars have sort of, and this isn't stuff that we came out of the gate and we just knew, but sort of over time in supporting these 14,000 people, we've sort of come up with a couple of ideas that seem to work really well. The first is open source and open access. That's a lot about what I've talked about already, where we just release what we got, right? We build something and we give it out to people, and they start working on it, and we bug fix and that kind of stuff, right? The open access is a lot about having them have access to us, right? The fact that they do have my email address can be a burden, but I'm also not going to block that. I'm not going to put a ton of checks and balances in the way of that, because it's important. It's important for me to be able to talk to and support all of these people who are using all of the code that I'm delivering to them, in order for them to be successful. one thing that we're working a lot on is making programming fun. And there's a lot of burdens inside of any company, especially a company like GE, where it's fun is not always there, right? You got things like VPNs, and you got things like proxies, and you got all this kind of junk, right? Which, is inherently like, antithesis to how developers want to work, right? We want free access. We want to get some stuff done. We want to get the company to get the heck out of our way, right? And so within, bounds, I am trying to do what I can to make developing with our stuff really, really fun. Because if I can do that, I can have all of these 14,000 engineers love my design system, want to build with it, and then convince their bosses that they need to be using it, right? And at the end, my goal is to have a lot of software out there running and built by GE, that looks great and matches all of this system, right? So I need to make it fun for them. Encouraging learning is something that we've really found to be powerful, right? Giving people resources to learn all kinds of different things. I'll talk a bit about that. And then some tools. So we're building some specific tools internally that allow non-developers to move forward, allow that army of back-end engineers to create UI without having to really understand UI, things of that sort. Digging in a bit on the open source and the open access thing, a couple things we've learned is, one, share your roadmap. People have a really hard time adopting what you are selling if they don't know that A, it's going to be there in 6 months or a year and 10 years, right? And B, sort of where it's coming down the pipe, right? And you can look to like the open source world, right? This is not new, right? We can look to one of the successes that Bootstrap's had is because they have done this, right? Because you can go to the Bootstrap GitHub page and you can see what they're working on. You can see where they're going, right? They make it crystal clear. You can look at other open source projects and it hasn't been touched in 3 months and you have no idea what's going on, and then suddenly, out pops something, right? And it's really hard to kind of get behind the guys who are not talking to you, who aren't sharing what they're doing or where they're going. And so internally we found a lot of value in just sort of sharing everything that we have planned, and course correct a bit, based on what you're hearing, but at least be open, right? If people don't buy into your roadmap, that's fine, but at least they have some information that they can judge on. Soliciting contribution, a big one. Make sure that you let people know that they can participate, right? This isn't a I'm up on Mount Sinai kind of dropping down wisdom, right? Instead, this is we're giving a really good starting point, and we need everyone to help us to get there, right? The thing that I say most often when somebody says, Dan, how come you don't have a date picker in your design system? I say, because you haven't built it yet. Right? That's my honest answer, right? There's 100 things that our design system doesn't have, right? It has a really, really good baseline. We're adding more stuff all we can, but did I mention that we're just like a handful of people? Like we're really strapped, right? The only way that I can succeed, the only way that I can scale is by getting contribution from all of those thousands and thousands of developers from around the world. So I'm going to keep going a bit. Sort of on the idea of the roadmap. This is my roadmap. Sorry you can't read it very well, but I'm more than happy to share it with you guys, right? You guys don't care what my roadmap is, but sort of being upfront and showing what you got, really, really helps. Community. We have found so much benefit by having a community presence as well. Internally at GE, we use some software from Cisco called Colab. It's a mediocre internal social network thing, but you know what? At least it's there, right? And we've got over 500 people participating daily in our community. People asking all kinds of questions. People helping each other. It's been a huge win. I can't emphasize enough sort of the value in once you have something that you want to share with your audience, give them somewhere to participate, give them somewhere to talk amongst themselves, right? And be part of it, right? Get in there, answer questions. What you'll find is you're going to have to get a lot of the conversations going early. Eventually, though, you can kind of step back and things just kind of magically happen, right? It's really great. Quick call out here to my friend Bill Scott. So Bill is the head of UI engineering at PayPal right now. Prior to that, he was at Yahoo and Meebo and Netflix, heading of UI engineering there as well. And as I was working on this presentation, he and I had lunch, and without me soliciting, he was talking about sort of all the ways that things are working really, really well and much better at a company like PayPal, which I think people here can attest, has traditionally had really crappy UI and UX. And one of the big wins that he has found is their investment in GitHub Enterprise. If you guys aren't familiar with it, it's basically GitHub inside your firewall. And what it's allowed is, really transformational collaboration across a company like PayPal. Just so happens that GE is also investing in this. We're going with a competitor called Stash. GE is heavily invested in the whole Atlassian suite, and so Stash is the competitor to GitHub. But we're really going to leverage everything about sort of like that whole collaborative coding, open source, model within the company here. And because of things like Stash, right, which are completely baked into the whole project workflow, you open a Jira ticket, you can then go and do a commit, you can close a ticket, et cetera, et cetera. This will be really kind of revolutionary for me, I think, sort of similar to how Bill over at PayPal has said GitHub has been revolutionary for him. To be able to really get everybody on board, right? I'm really excited about the world where I can actually get pull requests, right? Today I can't get pull requests because of internal systems, but we're almost there, right? So we're going to be able to allow people to do forking and be able to contribute seamlessly at their will whenever they need to. Let's see. This is a screenshot of a website that we call the Software Design Hub. Within the company, we have a one-stop shop for sort of everything that has to do with designing UI in the company. This is the place where you can download code. This is the place where you can learn as well. So we've got lots of information here about things like personas, right? We know that a big portion of our audience is engineers. If we can help them just a little bit become better designers, and have better empathy for UX process and that sort of thing, all the better, right? So we're purposely saying, go here, download your code. But in order to get there, we're going to have you kind of eat your vegetables a little bit. You're going to have to learn a little bit about UX before you kind of get there. We have on there all kinds of information as well around how to do some of the coding. So here we've got a quick snapshot of how we have our tear sheet, showing the sort of before and after sample code right next to finished code. This is for a data grid. Very similar to how Bootstrap has their tear sheets as well. Community, having there be a place to learn, put some powerful tools in place, right? So we're investing in putting all kinds of different tools out there. One of them are scripts. So we're shipping to all of our folks various grunt scripts that help them to embrace sort of a modern web workflow, which again, being heavily back-end engineers is sort of new to them, right? So give them some education, give them some explanation about how to do it, and give them some scripts using Grunt, using Maven, using some Python scripts as well for deploying your apps and that sort of stuff. We're distributing out design templates to all of the non-programmers across the company. This started with our initial launch of the design system based on Bootstrap. And I said, you know what? There's this company out there that has actually made OmniGraffle templates for Twitter Bootstrap. We should call them up. And so I did, and basically said, hey, can you make a customized version of that for GE? And they said, that's a great idea. We've actually never done that before, right? We've had lots of companies come to us and ask us to build them Bootstrap-based sites because of our demonstrated expertise and the fact that they've got this open source OmniGraffle template for Bootstrap. But that's kind of a cool idea. And that actually extended into us now having a set of OmniGraffle, Fireworks, Illustrator, and even PowerPoint templates. So that we can get this broader message out there to the larger company to say, here's how you design software, guys. Maybe you're a middle manager and your language is PowerPoint. Great. Use this tool to be able to do quick mock-ups so that you can better articulate to your team how you need this app to work, right? All of these tools sort of empower folks and unearth sort of the latent knowledge that they may have. Let's see. This is pretty washed out here, but a quick sneak peek into the studio that we're building. So we're building a web-based design tool If folks are familiar with tools like DivShot, man, that's so washed out. Sorry. Like DivShot is a tool, is a browser-based tool where you can, without doing any programming, lay out a Bootstrap-based page. We're building something internally that is very similar, right? Where we can have non-designers, perhaps even non-developers, go and be able to, using drag and drop tools, lay out a page, have it then actually generate real working code, have it basically generate a play application that they can then further customize, they can deploy, things of that sort, right? So these tools we're going to continue to push on so that we can remove all the barriers, right? This is about making sure that people don't have excuses anymore for not embracing really good UX as they're building apps. So sort of just to summarize real quick, design at scale, it takes a couple of things. First, it takes an upfront, really crisp perspective on what it's going to mean to bring great UX into your organization. I gave you some ideas about what it takes inside of a company like GE and what our notion is, right? It's embodied in our IIDS thing, but you need to figure out what's different for you. You have an army of developers out there. Mine happen to all be GE employees. Yours might be folks who are using your public API. It could be your customers. Who knows? But you need to find tools that will really allow them to contribute. And you need to focus on happy developers, right? I'm absolutely convinced that my success is based on making it really fun for developers to build great apps using all of my code. If they don't, then they're gonna find all kinds of other excuses to do things. There's already plenty of reasons for them not to embrace it, and I really need to make them happy, and I need to focus on their developer experience. And it looks like we are right at time, so I'm going to stop there and see if anyone has any questions. Yes?
What made you choose Twitter Bootstrap versus CSS frameworks like Foundation?
Right. So the question was, why did we adopt Bootstrap over competing things like Foundation or Right. So back at the time that we looked at it, so this would have been about January of last year was when we initially did this work. The comprehensiveness, I think, was probably the biggest thing, right? It really covered all the bases. We need to be able to build all kinds of a variety of apps. And so at the time, we felt that Bootstrap was really the most comprehensive. It had a lot of the responsive web based into it and that sort of thing. So that's what we went forward with. I'll be honest, I wouldn't say that we did a huge exhaustive bit of research and had lots of charts and matrices comparing foundations and others. But after some quick analysis, Twitter just kind of came out to be the top. So, yeah. Melly?
So you've talked about the carrots. What was the stick for this project to get this adoption?
What was the stick?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Stick. You've shown us all the incentives for people to adopt the design system.
Yeah.
Was there also a push on the other side to encourage people to adopt it?
Yes. It's called money. So the question was, I talked a lot about the carrots, right? All the things that are gonna attract people naturally to want to use our design system throughout the company, and what's the flip side of that? And the reality is it's funding, right? So if people want to, the group that I'm in has a significant amount of funding, and we can help to fund projects throughout the company. We're a research organization, and so people come to us and they're like, oh, we really want to work with you guys, and we're like, great, we want to work with you too, and we'll give you a bunch of money if you play ball and do our stuff, right? So we can certainly bring that to bear, and we do, right? It's a bit of each. I'm not the stick guy. I'm the carrot guy in the room. But there's often people who say, who are the other ones, and it's like, oh, well, if you want to be able to actually have some additional funding for your project, then you actually need to adopt our platform and all that kind of stuff as well. Yeah.
So in terms of the downside of things, what have been the problems with this stack? Because I understand what you're doing makes perfect sense, but there's always something that goes as planned, especially, for example, with versioning.
Yep.
You have so many different platforms. You have so many different websites, so many different documentation, so many different things that even though they're open,
Yep.
they're all different.
Yep.
So that's one problem versus what others you can think of
Yep.
that you have had.
So the question is, what kind of downsides have we found so far? And now that we've been, about a year into this experiment, and people have been adopting it. One example that you had brought is, what about versioning? We got people, we've been on a 2 to 4 week release cycle. So and people adopted at a certain time, and they probably moved forward in the project, and they're probably not updating. So they may be on older versions of our design system. What do we do about that? Honestly, we don't have an answer right now. Right now, we just know it's there, and we talk to people kind of one-off when they have a versioning problem. I'll say the biggest thing that we're dealing with right now actually is our reliance on Bootstrap, because it is so big. It's a giant blob of CSS, and it's impacting performance. And we're investing heavily over the next about 6 weeks in trying to fix that. Right, we're moving right now to where IIDS is basically one big blob of code, to where it's very much componentized, and you can buy off on what you want. And also, all of those various components are trimmed way, way down. We're hoping to cut the size down by maybe 30%, and it should be, that's very doable, right? It's at least 30% is what we can attain. So I would say probably that's one of the big technical burdens that we've had in buying off on some of these technologies is right now, like Bootstrap is really big. So I'll take one more question. Yes.
What about the mobile stack? Let's say the touch library and so on. We have the stack for mobile.
Right now, our stack for mobile is the same, right? It is we're purposely trying to not change the client side code, right? So that we can have consistency both in the experience and in the code on both desktop and on mobile. I mentioned that we're doing a bunch of experiments around PhoneGap, right? So that if you need more than just a mobile app, right? That runs in mobile Safari or Android. If you actually need to have a full app, you can basically pull all of our client-side code into like a PhoneGap app or something like that, and that's so far proving out to be very, very good. We don't have any additional code though that we're adding in. We're not adding in Sencha Touch. We're not adding in any additional libraries so far for doing mobile-specific work. Everything is working out to be pretty good. HighCharts, I mentioned that we're invested heavily in them. They just released their version 3.0 of their library, and it's all mobile stuff. There's a couple of new charts, but almost all is mobile, and so they have like multi-touch support now, where you can pinch and zoom to like zoom in on data sets and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. All right, I think our time is up, so I'm going to let everybody go. I'm happy to answer more questions if you have them. Thank you.